what are some of the ways in which social media is affecting adolescent development?
A good portion of the research tends to show significant relationships between adolescent social media use and depression, anxiety, and loneliness, among other indicators of mental health.
Like you're sitting at Chili's, a child is misbehaving or crying, one of the parents hands the kid an iPad.
And that's okay if you do it every now and then. If that is your only response to your child crying, that's when it becomes a problem.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good People, episode 58. My guest today is Dr. Drew Cingel. He is an associate professor in the Department of Communication at UC Davis. In today's episode, we talked about his interest in the cross-section between human development and media use, ways in which social media use affects adolescent development, the kinds of characteristics that are most influential in developmental outcomes, and some positive strategies that we can use to build better relationships with media and media use. If you guys are on YouTube, before the episode begins, please head on down and like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. When you interact with our page, it really helps us grow this thing, and we appreciate it and you. Enjoy the show. Walk me through when you first became interested in the cross-section between, human development and media use.
I was a senior in college at Penn State University, and my nieces at the time were 8 and 10, and the oldest had a cell phone. And I watched her using it, and she texted me, and I could barely discern what she was trying to say. And I started to think to myself, we study people, we study adults, and there's kind of this assumption that they show up when they're in college and we get them in our samples, that they haven't had 20 years of media use. And that is increasingly growing, right? That today in 2024, children are being introduced to media and technology at earlier and earlier ages. And I just started thinking about my niece, what is this doing to her development, cognitive development, emotional development, social development, that she has access to this really incredible and powerful tool, but she has it at a much earlier age, at a different developmental time than certainly when I got my first cell phone, my parents got their first cell phone, and the older generations.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. I have one niece, one nephew, both under 2 years old. And I was just visiting my nephew this past weekend, and we were showing him pictures of a baby on a cell phone, and he was smiling at it. And
Yep.
My niece can hang up FaceTime and knows the sound when it's on. And that's actually one of the main reasons why I've become fascinated by this topic, is because it's become a more obvious thing in my life where even I had my first cell phone when I was 12 or 13. It was a smartphone. And so obviously that I'm sure that has affected me in many ways that I'm sure we'll get into, but I didn't have it that young. That is crazy. And it's cool that it seems like that's why it's so close to you as you were observing it. But maybe even expand on that a little bit more. Why does this topic fascinate you, even maybe outside of that?
Well, I think the reason why it fascinates anyone, you don't have to be a parent. You just have to be a member of society. And you can see that the current generation, the generation even before them, have a totally different relationship with technology and media than we ever had. And it's not that we are that much older. It's just that there was this kind of crux in, say, 2004. That's when Facebook starts. 2007 is when the iPhone comes out. 2010 is when the iPad comes out. The growth of mobile media has made it that we have these devices on our person at all times. And the way that children interact is just fundamentally different. It looks fundamentally different. And I think that's why there's such an interest in it right now, because when we walk out the front door, this is what we see happening. The story that always sticks with me is I had a child come into my lab. They were probably 3 years old or so. And I have a flat screen TV in my lab, and the child walked up to it and touched the left corner and swiped across the bottom because they thought that that's how you turned on a TV, because that's how you open an iPhone,
Yeah.
right? That's how you open an iPad. They knew how to do that. They were 3 years old, and they were trying to apply that same knowledge that they already had for how to turn on a screen to a flat screen TV. And I thought, this is fascinating. This is something that I've got to keep studying.
I know we'll talk a little bit about the, how and why and what in regards to development and how media affects it. But something that I've just thought of that I'm curious about that, what you just said prompted me. Is there, based off of the work you've done, a definitive, point in time that you can sort of constitute as people born before this time are either less affected or unaffected by media in certain ways, and people born after this time would be considered among the group? Or is it more of a kind of confusing spectrum? So for example, I was born in the year 2000. I didn't get my first smartphone until I was 13. I had very little exposure to the sort of integrated media that we do. I played the GameCube and stuff growing up. But the sort of integrated media that, say, my little brother who's born in 2007, or even some of the kids that are being born nowadays have exposure to. Does that question make sense? Is there, a definitive timeline that sort of separates generations, or is it more of a spectrum?
I wish there was a simple answer to that, but it is much more of a spectrum. And here's why. Something that is really interesting me right now is the role of parents, the role that parents play in their children's development, certainly, but also in their children's media and technology use. My parents grew up in a world without much media, right? There was a television set in the living room, and that was about it. Then the internet starts to come out, and we have desktop computers, but they developed and they integrated media into their lives at a very different time than me. So when I was growing up, they would look at my media use and think, this is totally different, right? I need to figure out how to integrate this into my child's life, but I also don't know if I have the tools to be able to do that. The parents today, right now, the parents of your average 3, 4, 5-year-old, they grew up in a world saturated by media and technology. And so the way that they conceptualize the role of media and technology in the home, in their lives, in the lives of their children, is, again, very different than parents in the past. And so the reason why there isn't this perfect cutoff is because the way that media gets integrated into the home is a bidirectional process. It comes from the child and the child's needs, but also the parent and the parent's needs. And you have these very interesting kind of relationships happening now where, depending on the age of the parent, depending on how they grew up and how they used media, that's influencing their child and their home environment, and vice versa.
That makes sense. It just depends. And I'm sure there's also like the values of the parents, depending on the kind of values that you grow up around, how much media use is enforced. I imagine that, due to conversations like you and I are having, there probably will be parents who in the future will be like super hardcore, like no media use type stuff. And so, yeah, very, very interesting question. It's, why that I'm talking to you. Okay. In broad terms, what are some of the ways in which social media is affecting adolescent development?
So the big question right now that many researchers, in addition to myself, are trying to understand is the link between social media use among adolescents and mental health. A good portion of the research tends to show small but statistically significant relationships between adolescent social media use and depression, anxiety, and loneliness, among other indicators of mental health. Certainly not every study demonstrates that. Many show that in certain cases there can be a positive relationship, that it can actually promote positive mental health. And many find a null relationship or no significant relationship between those variables. The thing that we are trying to do in my lab and a few other researchers around the world is look at which groups of adolescents are more or less susceptible to positive or negative effects of social media use on mental health. If you think about it at a population level, everybody's social media looks different. Everyone uses different platforms. Everyone sees different content. Everyone has different audiences and is linked with different people. And so if you think about it that way, it doesn't really make sense for everyone to be affected in the same way or even in a consistent way, right? Like the content that you see is probably very different than what I see, is probably very different from most of the people listening to this, what they see. And so we know that certain people, certain adolescents are more susceptible to a positive effect. Some studies show that upwards of 20% when they use social media, they experience positive mental health. They feel better about themselves. They're happier. But those same studies tend to show that about 10% feel worse. They are less happy. And so what we're trying to do is understand, are there demographic factors that can predict membership in either of those groups? Does it have to do with how the adolescent has constructed what we call their personal social media environment? Does it have to do with the algorithms that then take what they are following, what they click on, what they hover over, and push them more of that recommended content? And the more that we do that, I hope that in a few years, we'll have a better understanding of what sort of adolescents are more susceptible to positive effects, and how can we take that and make even more susceptible to positive effects, but also understand who is susceptible to that negative effect, and what can we do to help those adolescents so that they don't experience those negative effects on their mental health.
It sounds like this is obviously still ongoing, but are there any specific things that you're noticing, any characteristics that might be worth pointing out?
Yeah, so we know there's fairly clear evidence that adolescent females in particular, when they use social media, they are more at risk for negative outcomes. So we have a data set that we are working with right now. It's 231,000 adolescents across 40 different countries, including the United States, but a good bit of Europe, some parts of Asia. And of those 40 countries, adolescent females, the effect of social media use on adverse mental health is stronger compared to males in 38 of those 40 countries.
Do you know why?
We're looking at it from a gender inequality perspective. Gender inequality is a pervasive part of certainly American culture, but many other cultures around the world. That plays a role in it. Adolescent females, this is anecdotally, but they are more likely to be subject to sexual content on social media, in addition to just gender unequal content on social media. And our hypothesis is that those things together are what are accounting for this stronger negative relationship.
Is there a difference between, do you know if there's a difference between male and female, like platform use? Are females more likely to use Instagram, or are males more likely to use YouTube? What is it?
There are some small differences. Part of the problem is that there is a ceiling effect, right? That such large majorities of adolescents use Instagram, use YouTube, for example. So yes, females are slightly more likely to use Instagram, most studies show. But the difference is very small, because we're talking about it somewhere in the 90% range.
I'm curious about the positive side of things. This is something that I've not really, obviously, I think most people would consider that at some level there are positive benefits of using social media, connecting with old friends in an adult context. But from an adolescent perspective, this is not something that I've really considered. What are some of the positive benefits that you're seeing in this age group of people with social media use?
Yeah, I want to be very clear that there are positive relationships of positive outcomes of social media use. For adolescents in particular, one big area is connecting adolescents with other adolescents or other people around the world who experience life and feel the same way that adolescent feels. So if you're an adolescent that is grappling with your identity, whatever that identity might be, and you feel like you're the only person in the world that feels that way, social media provides an easy way for you to connect with people who feel that way too, who are grappling with those questions of identity, and make you feel less alone, make you feel heard, make you feel seen, make you feel like this is something that people have gone through. And these are people that can offer advice to me of how I can navigate this myself. Certainly, social media can also connect adolescents with friends who are very different from them all over the world. Understand that people are different, that people have different beliefs and different goals and different desires, but they're still adolescents, and you can still talk to them and question why they feel that way, and connect you with people who are different. And those are huge, huge positives of social media use. The number one developmental goal of adolescence is to form a peer group. And this allows you to do that not just in person, but online. It allows you to do that whenever you want, 24/7. It allows you to do that with people all around the world who are similar to or different from you. And that is something that previous generations have not had access to.
Yeah, that's something that I've never really considered. Previously you're kind of constrained to the community and environment that you grow up with. So the different kinds of people and beliefs that you see is obviously limited in that way.
Right. I mean, if you think about when you were growing up pre social media, I could, in my own life, I could connect with my friends in person primarily. We could do it at school, after school in clubs. Friday nights we'd go and play basketball. But once we all went back to our homes, it was hard to connect. We could use cell phones, we could text, but we didn't have this 24/7 kind of connection. And so it's not surprising in any way that if you give an adolescent a tool like mobile media, or you give them a tool like social media that allow them to maintain connections to peers, to allow them to grow connections to peers, that they take advantage of it. And that's why you see such high rates of social media use among adolescents. So those are the positives, but they also have those risks associated with them as well.
Mm. This might be slightly off topic, and I'll definitely pull back to center here in a minute, but have you guys looked at video game usage, video game playing at all? Is that something that you've taken a look at?
That's not something that my lab studies in particular. There are plenty of people that study adolescent video games and video game use. That's just not the focus of our research right now.
The only reason I brought that up is because this is obviously anecdotally. I played a crap load of World of Warcraft when I was young.
That's a scientific term, right?
A crap load, yeah. I don't know how to quantify it. I've spent hours and hours and hours playing World of Warcraft, League of Legends, other games, similar online games, right? And kind of what you're describing with the social media aspect of building a community online, that was the way that I did that. I don't think that when I was young, maybe the communication systems were slightly different, but I didn't really use Instagram and Facebook and these other, I guess, newer social media platforms for that purpose. But I definitely got the same, like I garnered a lot of confidence in myself from the kinds of relationships that I built online, doing some raid on World of Warcraft, right? Where, whoever I'm with says that my damage output was high enough and it made me feel good, right? There was a reward pathway in that way. And I guess I just probably from my own perspective, never really connected that, kids are probably getting a similar sort of reward feedback from social media today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is not our research, but that research does exist. A key finding there with these multiplayer games is that tends to be associated with pro-social intentions and pro-social behavior among adolescents. So these types of behaviors that don't benefit you in any way, but that benefit others. And that's because if you think about that type of gameplay that you just described, what are you doing? You're working together as a team to achieve some sort of goal. You're communicating with each other to figure out who's going to do what to allow this other person to do this other thing. That's a huge part of being a leader. That's a huge part of being able to work effectively in a team. That's a huge part of being able to get a job down the road and work with different groups of people to achieve a common goal. And that's a common outcome that we see of that type of video game play.
What are some of the unintended aspects that we maybe didn't expect to happen out as a result of, having such high level of connectivity with social media?
Well, I think that there's a lot. I think that we're still just trying to figure that out. Part of it is kind of what I alluded to earlier with algorithms. There is increasingly, we are increasingly seeing content that we like, that is pushed to us because the algorithms know what we like. But the downside of that is we're only seeing certain things. And what we're seeing and what is being recommended to us is very heterogeneous across the population, right? So again, you see your content, I see my content, the kid in the house next door sees that content. And it's very, very different in many cases. And I don't think we know the downstream consequences of that yet. Similarly, like I said, we have given adolescents a tool that allows them to maintain connections 24/7. But is that at the expense of, are these online connections at the expense of offline connections? What role does that play in offline social relationships or offline social interactions? I don't think we know the answers to those questions yet. And the other thing too, if we've given adolescents a tool that they're using at all times, they're only 24 hours in a day. That part is not changing. And so if you spend X amount of time on social media or X amount of time on your phone, that is displacing time that you could spend engaging in other activities. And adolescents are still developing. Certainly younger children are still developing. And so what developmental tasks, what developmental abilities are being delayed or displaced because children and adolescents are spending so much more time online? We're starting to understand those questions right now.
What are some of those things that you're starting to understand?
The big one is with self-regulation. So we all have developed self-regulation, or we all develop it across the course of childhood into adolescence and young adulthood. And this is self-regulation and emotion regulation are huge components of social skills down the road, of academic success and later job success and so on. And any adult who's listening to this with developed self-regulation knows how hard it is when you are scrolling on social media or when you're watching Netflix and you can just keep scrolling. It's easy to do. Cognitively, that there are other things that you should be doing in this moment, right? I've watched 2 episodes on Netflix. I've spent an hour scrolling on a social media platform. Cognitively, I know that I need to do other things. But how easy is it to just let the Netflix countdown and the next episode to start? Or how easy is it to just keep going? We know it's easy. We do it all the time. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a child who has not developed this capacity yet. Put yourself in the shoes of an 8-year-old who's on YouTube and who's watching a video and has not developed self-regulation yet. And that video ends and it just rolls over to the next one that the algorithm sends, and that child keeps watching it. Not only is that problematic in terms of just displacing time that child could be spent doing something else, or it could be problematic because the content is not designed for children, but also it is not teaching that child, it is not giving them the ability to practice self-regulation. Similarly, if you're a parent, your child is experiencing negative emotions, they're crying, they're upset. A common thing to do is to give your child an iPad, give your child a cell phone, right? And that's an easy win in the moment because the child stops crying. But that's not allowing that child to practice self-regulation. That's not allowing that child to practice emotion regulation. And if that happens over and over and over again, that's decreasing the trajectory of that child's development in that domain, or at least the possibility exists that is displacing the amount of time the child could spend practicing those key developmental tasks.
I think that's going to be a big wake-up call for anybody that's listening, because I can't tell you how many times, I don't have children, but like you're sitting at Chili's, name your favorite restaurant, I don't know. And that exact scenario plays out where a child is misbehaving or crying or, is getting impatient that the food isn't coming, and one of the parents hands the kid an iPad. I think it's good to know that there's a potential for harm there, because even, I don't know if just like I'm in tune with that, but even from an outside perspective, I think to myself, like, that can't be a good thing to do. Like, that, it's not only our job to teach our children good values, but I think from obviously a developmental standpoint, reflecting as an example the behavior that that you expect. That's all part of that process, is that sort of toil of them misbehaving and you correcting or showing, et cetera. So it's good to hear that there's some. I think it's going to be a wake up call for parents. Hopefully it'll next time I will go to hand my kid an iPad, I probably should think twice.
Well, that's a good point. A couple of things here. First, it's not just parents. Almost anyone listening to this, I always say, is the supportive adult in a child's life, whether it's a cousin, a niece or a nephew, a younger sibling, what have you. You don't just have to be a parent. But the second thing is that parenting in 2024 is incredibly hard. So I want to be clear. It is entirely understandable why, when the child is acting up at a restaurant, that the parent hands that child a cell phone or a tablet to keep them quiet, because you've had a hard day. You just want to hang out with your partner and have a nice meal. What you said, though, I think is important, and I talk about it a lot. It's bringing media use from the unconscious to the conscious. When we live in such a media-saturated world, we look around us and we see what other people are doing, and we see that people at restaurants are on their cell phones. When we stand in line at the grocery store, why do I study this? Why do I pull out my cell phone and look at it? It's because everyone else around me is doing it. And I think a lot of the time our media use is unconscious. We just assume that this is what we need to do because this is the world we live in and this is what everyone else is doing. But when you bring it from the unconscious to the conscious, you can start thinking about, for your own media use, why am I doing this? What am I getting out of it? Do I feel better? Did I learn something? Did something positive happen? Or did something negative happen? Did I miss something important? Did I waste time that I could have spending with my partner, my child, what have you? And in the situation that we're describing, you can think about, well, the short term response is that my child stops crying. And that's okay if you do it every now and then. If that is your only response to your child crying, that's when it becomes a problem. Media is just one tool in your parent or supportive adult toolbox that you can use to parent or spend time with a child, right? And if it's used appropriately within reason, that is fine. If that's the only tool you ever used, that's when these problems start to arise.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this issue in 5-10 years is going to be something that we look back on similar to, smoking or insert any other sort of negative health outcome? Obviously, people still smoke. Like, this is a good example. I probably smoke 2 cigars a year with my dad at like the beach or whatever. And I know smoking's not good for me, but I've thought about it. And when I'm sitting on the beach and the sun's going down and I'm with my family, it's like, it's a great time. It's a memory that I look back on. Right. And so I'm consciously making that choice. Do you surmise that this media use and phone use is going to be the same thing, where we'll hopefully create a little bit of distance from it to where we can go, okay, how do we actually want to use this productively in our lives?
I hope so. And I think so. I think if you had asked me 3 years ago, I don't know if I would have given you that same answer. But in the last 3 years, a couple of things have happened. We as a society have started to talk a lot more about mental health. It is much more of an open topic that we talk about, that we are concerned about, and that we are interested in promoting. And in the last 3 years, we have gone from a society that did not regulate social media for minors in any sort of way to now more than 25 states have social media regulatory bills working their way through state legislatures, and it's bipartisan. Those states, if you look at them, they're Democrat, they're Republican, they're led by Democrats, they're led by Republicans. It doesn't matter, because I think that we as a society have determined that the mental health of youth is important, something worth promoting for the next generation, and that regulating social media in smart, common sense ways for youth is something that we have the societal and political willpower to do right now. And that has happened in the span of 3 years, that we're thinking about this more. We're thinking about how to make environments safer for children and adolescents, and we're doing the political work to actually make that a reality.
To draw one more time on like the making the unconscious conscious, is the term you use supporting adult?
A supportive adult. So I also do not have children. I have many, many nieces and nephews. I have many of my friends have children that I spend time with, that I babysit. That's being a supportive adult. You're not the parent, but you are someone that is a main focus in that child's life, and you can help them to grow and thrive, just like a parent.
Mm. And so, if you fulfill one of these roles, to bring back what we were talking about at the beginning, right? There's an innumerable amount of variables that could be considered when it comes to how X media is affecting this child or adolescent through development. What platform are they using? I'm sure their specific qualities as an individual has a lot to do with it as well, how it's received, et cetera. And so I think, and maybe you can touch on this a little bit more, is that why this bringing the unconscious conscience mentality seems to be a good, almost broad stroke over how this is a way to fix some of these things? Because it really does depend, and the only way to know for sure if what you're doing is working is to be attuned to these children that you have a relationship with, asking them how they're doing, giving them advice if they come to you and say that this one thing that they consumed is affecting them negatively. It's almost just another layer to our societal structure that now needs to be considered when it comes to teaching children.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the difficult thing about studying what I do is that people are so different. Just demographically, they're different in terms of their attitudes and their beliefs. They're different in terms of where they live. All of those things play a role in how they use media, how they integrate media into the home, the effects that their children have when they use media. And so it is very dependent. It is very context and family dependent. But I will say the number one predictor of a child's media use is their parents' media use. And so if you are a parent or a supportive adult and you say no phones at the table, no phones while we're eating, no phones after 9 p.m. or before bedtime or whatever it is, but then you do that yourself, that's not going to work. That's not going to work for your children. They're going to just model the behavior that they see you doing. They're going to say, this is the relationship that my parent has with media. That's going to be the relationship that I have with media. And so if you yourself can move your media use from the unconscious to the conscious and think about what you're doing, and then that next step, think about what you are modeling to your child or the child that's in your life, then we can start to make healthier choices for ourselves, but also for our children.
Mm. I used to feel like digital dependency was sort of this sunk cost that was associated with the world of communication that we live in. Like media is so accessible and advanced that we are just going to be dependent on these things. But, talking to you, I've talked to a couple of other people on the show before. I don't really think that's true anymore. I think that there are these, more productive habits or relationship things that we can build with the tools that we use, similar bringing the unconscious conscious. It's really very much that idea in essence. But something that I guess I'm becoming curious about is, what is your perspective on that? Obviously at some level, I'm sure that we have to live with this level of communication, right? And is it very in line with what we're talking about already, that it just kind of depends and it's a tool and we need to use it? We need to use it as such.
Yeah, it's just that. It's a tool. It is but one of many tools that we have in our lives to be happy and healthy and productive members of society. But it doesn't need to be your only tool. Or you can use certain parts of it, right? The parts that work for you and your family, the parts that make you feel better, the parts that make you more productive, the parts that make you happier. And so just remembering that it is a tool, that you can use it on your own terms, that you don't need to use it 24/7, that your child doesn't need to use it 24/7, but that we need to figure out how to integrate this into our lives. That's I think the big question of our time. That's the big question of being a parent right now, is how can I integrate media and technology into my life, my child's life, and our home, so that they get the digital skills that they need to thrive in 2024 and beyond, but also that accentuate the positives that we know exist and suppress the negatives that we also know that exist.
In that regard, helicopter parenting, right? This becomes something that I think about. There can be a bit of an overstep, right? I think something that I wish that I had, my grandfather will tell me stories from his youth about like the crazy stuff him and his friends did down by the river, and like he probably shouldn't have been doing it, and his parents probably would have been upset if he had told them what he was doing. And I assume that the ethics of this starts to come into play with this type of conversation, right? If I want my children to be well developed, to feel safe and secure, to have a lot of freedom, I need to be aware of the type of content that they're consuming, how they're consuming it, the types of people they're interacting with online. But I would imagine from the child's perspective, there might be a little bit of overstepping that happens. Like, you know, I have to come up with ways around talking to people because I know my dad's going to be checking my Instagram messages. Is this something that you've considered at all?
Yeah, it's something that I talk about with parents a lot. What I usually suggest is what I call you form a contract, right? This is usually when you're making those big decisions about should I give my child a phone? Should I let them get on Instagram for the first time? And you're absolutely right. As a parent and as a child, the child needs autonomy. The child needs to understand that they can make their own decisions, that they are their own person. But the parent also plays a role in that, right? Of modeling how to make healthy decisions in your life, modeling how to be your own person and be an individual. So what I usually say for parents grappling with that question is talking with your children about a contract. And some parents actually formally write it up and sign it, and they have their kids sign it. But it says, I will allow you to have this cell phone, and this is what I am going to do as the parent, right? I'm going to ask you about it twice a day, and you will answer me, right? I, the parent, will not use my cell phone at the dinner table, and you, the child, will not use your cell phone at the dinner table, right? And by doing that, you are opening a conversation with your child, and making sure that they understand. Yeah, there are some things that I expect from you, but I'm also giving you some autonomy here, right? I'm not going to track it 24/7. But when I do check in with you to see what you're doing, I expect you to tell me and to show me, and we're going to have a conversation about that. I think that is a healthy way of integrating media into the home, and it also holds the parent accountable too, right? If I'm going to make this rule for you that you cannot use your cell phone within an hour of going to bed, and that we're going to put our phones in a basket in the kitchen and charge them before bed so that we don't take them into the bedroom with us, then the parent needs to be held accountable for that. And if the child sees that, then they're seeing a parent who's modeling healthy behavior with respect to technology and phones. And most of the research would demonstrate that that child will then have a healthier relationship with media moving forward.
Hmm. Do you get any pushback on that? There's a gentleman named Dr. John Deloney. He's a counselor, and he posted something on Instagram. He posted a lot of emotional health, anxiety type content out, and he posted a thing on Instagram that when his kids' friends come over, he makes them all put their phone in a bowl, and like you can't use your phone. And if you have to make a call or reach out to somebody, you have to go up to the bowl, get your phone out, do it while you're standing there, and then put it back in and then resume. And he's just commenting on, last night, my kids, I don't know their ages, I think like 8 to 12 in that category, maybe a little bit older. They had s'mores and they played manhunt outside, doing all of the things that I remember somewhat doing and probably you remember doing. And I looked through the comments and they were riddled with, I would never let my kid go over to a parent's house who did this. I can't believe that you took their ability to communicate away from them, with me from them. And I don't know, it just made me think like these parents probably grew up without cell phones and they were fine. And I don't know, the pushback on that was kind of shocking to me, that more people weren't like, this is an awesome idea, I'm going to adopt something similar. But do you get any pushback on that?
No, because I think that what he did is fine. I don't think it's particularly actionable advice for the average parent, right? Like, Media is a part of our lives. Technology is a part of our lives. I focus my research and I focus when I talk to parents more on how can we integrate it in a healthy way into our day-to-day functioning. Just saying no media, no technology, put your phone in a bowl, that might work for him. That might work for some families. And if it does, that's great. I don't think it works for the average family in 2024. What you might be seeing there, some of that pushback you might be seeing, are parents that just know that I couldn't do that, right? Like I just cannot do that. Or the parent that said, that has grown accustomed to being able to contact their child and know what they're doing and feeling better about that. That to me is a question for that individual family rather than this kind of top-down sort of advice.
Okay. What would you expect would be a more realistic approach to some sort of regulatory thing in regards to phone and media use?
Do you mean regulatory with like government regulations on social media?
That maybe just speak broadly on that. Like what does the life for the average family trying to develop a reasonable young person look like? Is there time frame limits? After this time, you can't have it. Is it hours per actually on the screen? What would that look like?
Sure.
Is there government involvement? I don't know.
I'll answer it in two different ways. So for the family, a few things that tend to be good are having some sort of plan in place for cell phones in the bedroom. Given the design of social media in particular, it's very easy for an adolescent to stay up late on their scrolling through social media on their phone, displacing sleep. Sleep is associated with all kinds of positive outcomes among children and adolescents. So if there are things that you can do as a family, that's where I said the common one that I see is the Wi-Fi gets turned off at 9-10 o'clock at night. And that way the entire family is like, we're offline starting at this time. Or we're going to put our devices in a basket somewhere and charge them so they're ready to go the next morning. But that way they don't get brought into the bedroom. Right? Those are things that you can do and think about and experiment with as a family. But as I mentioned, we are increasingly at a higher level as a society. We're becoming much more interested in how can we make small changes to the design of social media so that it creates a healthier space for children, adolescents when they're on there. Because you mentioned, Joel, about time. It's really hard. For some adolescents, they can spend a lot of time on social media and it's not really that bad. And some can spend a short period of time, but it's bad because the content that they're seeing is very different, right? And so just having this cutoff of, X number of minutes or X number of hours on a screen is good/bad, that doesn't necessarily work for the average adolescent. But if we can do things like age verification, for example, where we make sure that people above the age of 13 are on social media and people below the age, that's the legal age that you technically have to be on social media, that they're not. Or that parents have a say, that parents need to consent before their child opens a social media account. Or that there are additional tools in place that that parents can set it so that social media is inaccessible after 10:30 p.m. or something like that. Those are some of the things that are working their way through state legislatures right now that are being considered at the state level. And I'll just say very quickly, I just did a survey of over 1,300 parents across the United States where we asked them their attitudes about these various different regulations that different states are considering. And the findings were somewhat surprising to me because what they screamed to me were that parents desperately want help. They desperately want something, but they don't know what it is. They don't know necessarily, is it increased control? Is it age verification? Is it parent consent to open accounts? Is it stopping direct messaging to strangers? Is it stopping directed advertising to children and adolescents? Their attitudes were high across the board. There was very little variation in parents, which says they want something. They're not sure what that is, but they want help right now.
Hmm. Yeah, that is hopeful. And I think that it sounds like, talking to you, that one of the main reasons why we don't know what that is because we're still figuring it out, right? Like there's so much variation. What is the best case scenario? What do you suppose the timeline is on this? How many years do you think before we really can wrap our heads around a system that works?
Look, like I said, 3 years ago, I'd have told you it wasn't going to happen. So in the span of 3 years, things have changed very markedly. I think that we do have the societal and political willpower right now. And we're looking at what other countries are doing. We're looking at what other states are doing and considering whether that will work here. Just very quickly, another recent study we did, we compared adolescents in the United States to adolescents in South Korea. South Korea has a very different regulatory structure with regard to social media. They have increased age verification, parental consent, and the burden of liability is actually different, so that social media companies can be sued, can be held liable for pushing sexual and violent content, for example, to people under the age of 19. That's the age of consent over there. And what we found, we measured what we call pathological social media use. And that's this type of social media use that we know to be bad. When you're staying up late, when you're getting into staying up late because you're on your cell phone or using social media, when your media use is causing conflict with friends and family, when you just say, it really is difficult for me to stop using it. We know that that's associated with poor mental health. And in both of those samples, the American sample and the South Korean sample, we found that to be the case. The pathological social media use was associated with increased depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and loneliness. What was interesting is that the statistical effect in South Korea was half that in comparison to the American adolescents. So there's something about South Korean culture, there's something about the regulatory structure of South Korea that's having a protective effect. That even when you use social media in this, what we know to be problematic way, it still has an association with worse mental health, but it's weaker than over here. And we're trying to figure out what exactly that is and how can we learn from that. And if it does have to do with regulations, how can we take advantage of some of those things that we know work and apply it in the United States to promote child and adolescent mental health.
What do you suppose some of those differences are that you're looking into?
So we're looking at the regulatory environment. We're also looking at cultural differences. So in South Korea, there's much more of a focus on the functioning of the group. And I have had Korean adolescents tell me that before I post something, I'll actually think about, what will my friends think about this? Will it make them feel better or will it make them feel worse? And this is why, again, I talk about bringing the unconscious to the conscious. If you think about, hey, I'm about to post this message, how are other people going to perceive it? Is it going to make them feel better? If so, post away. But if I think it's going to make them feel worse, in Korea, they're telling me they won't post that. I don't hear that same kind of thinking among American adolescents. So that's another thing that we are considering as well.
That's so fascinating to me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people on the show about a variety of different things, athletics, owning a business, whatever. And that's a recurrent theme that keeps coming up, is one of the greatest mistakes of the modern world that we live in, at least in America, seems to be this hyper individualized focus that everybody seems to have. And like, even to that point, any career turmoil that I've ever gone through, or work problems, or I'm struggling because the podcast episode didn't do as well as I wanted to. If I go out with my friends and I have a drink and we just talk about whatever, I feel better. And I think more people would do better knowing that there is so much fulfillment and peace and happiness and betterment to be found if you just focus on the communities that are around you and you try to embed yourself in them a little bit more and help each other out.
Well, and it's going to work for everyone, right? Again, if the number one goal of adolescence is to form a peer group, and you think about your peer group's functioning, right? You're is this thing that I'm about to post on Instagram going to make my friends feel better or worse about themselves? You can imagine that if you post enough things that make them feel worse, eventually they're not going to be your peer group anymore. But if you post things that either have no effect whatsoever or make them feel better, that you're going to feel more close knit as a peer group. You're going to have better social connections with that peer group. Your peer group's going to function even better. It will have these downstream positive consequences for you and everyone else around you.
Hmm. It sounds kind of like, and we were talking about this earlier, that the specific kind and amount of media use isn't as much of a factor as long as all of the other boxes are being checked. Like you mentioned, as long as this adolescent is getting enough sleep. We obviously know this is a big part of development, making sure we're getting enough sleep. Even as an adult, getting enough sleep is one of the most crucial parts to maintaining your overall health. Probably getting some level of activity and exercise, I would imagine, is important during adolescence. Eating a diet that is varied and nutritious, having a social group. So it sounds like, and I might be jumping to an assumption that I can't be making, but it sounds like as long as these specific developmental boxes are checked, the actual media use becomes a little bit less relevant.
Yeah, I think the only, that's in terms of time, I would say, right? So everything in moderation, being on social media, using media, consuming streaming content is generally fine in adolescence, so long as, again, it's not displacing time that could be spent doing all these other important things that you just listed or working on all those important developmental goals of childhood and adolescence. The only part where that doesn't quite work is with respect to certain types of content, right? We know that violent content tends to be associated with negative outcomes. We know that certain types of sexual content, at least, tends to be associated with negative outcomes in terms of attitudes about sex, attitudes about sexuality and gender. And so those are places that you do want to be careful, right? That even if you're consuming something in moderation, if it is bad content, whatever that bad might be, that is still going to be more risky than more general content.
Hmm. Where do you generally point parents to look if this topic is something that they're fascinated with, they want to look more into, they want strategies that they can use for their children? What are some ways that parents can learn more about this?
I always highly recommend Common Sense Media, commonsensemedia.org. They are a nonprofit organization that posts reviews about content through childhood and adolescence. If there is something that you want your young child to learn, your 4-year-old, you can go on there, search by 4-year-old, say socio-emotional learning, and it will pull up content that meets those standards. If there's something if you see children in your orbit consuming media and you think, I don't know if that's right for my child based on where they are in terms of age or development, you can read about it on there and make that determination for yourself. They also have a research arm. They post their research reports and their research findings on their website as well. You just need to make an account. Otherwise, it's free. And you can read the most cutting edge research about how children and adolescents in the United States are using media. So they're a great organization, a great tool for parents and other supportive adults.
Anything else that you would like to mention there?
No, I want to reiterate that being a parent in 2024 is hard. And again, I'm not a parent myself, but I research enough children and I talk to enough parents to know this to be true. And at times it can feel like you're overwhelmed, certainly in terms of media. But I hope that if anything, this last hour has demonstrated that there are a few easy things that you can start to work on yourself and as a family that can take advantage of this incredible tool and use it for good for yourself, your family, and for your child.
Something else that I wanted to ask you is, it sounds like you guys are kind of on this edge of understanding a lot more about this conversation, this topic. For anybody that's interested in following along with the work you're doing, I imagine there's probably a lot of colleagues that you have are working diligently that are also on the on the cusp of learning lots of new things, where can people follow along with you to keep up with that sort of stuff?
So all of our most recent research you can find at medialabs.ucdavis.edu. That is where we have all of our content. We also have lists of our collaborators around the world that are doing research in this area, and it links to those individuals as well.
Excellent. Well, Drew, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I definitely learned a whole lot from you, and I'm excited for the next couple of years of hopefully getting to see all the stuff that you guys learn and develop in this field. But is there anything else that you'd like to add before we close it off?
No, I appreciate you letting me come on and talk. And if anyone out there listening has any additional questions, my contact information's on the website, and I would be happy for you to reach out.
Excellent. I'll make sure I put all that stuff you mentioned in the description of the show too. So anybody that's interested in talking to you or that wants to check that out, they can just head down there and it'll be there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. Before you head out and you're on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. And if you feel so inclined, please share this episode with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. We'll see you next time.